December 14th, 1881. I was standing in Calico Ridge Town Square, snow coming down so thick you couldn't see shame on their faces, but you could sure as hell feel it in the air. They'd set up that auction platform same place they hung horse thieves, figured that was fittin' in their minds. There she was, this girl barely grown, kneeling in the snow with iron round her ankle and a newborn going blue in her arms. Blood trail from her knees to the planks, already freezing over. And these men, grown men mind you, they're bidding on her like she's a mare past her prime. I'd come for barbed wire, left with a family. Now I ain't saying I'm a hero. Heroes don't got 3 missing fingers and a limp from frostbite. But by dawn, either we'd be free, or buried in ground too frozen to dig. The town square was packed tighter than a Sunday service, but there wasn't nothing holy about what was happening. Folks stood shoulder to shoulder despite the cold, breath fog mixing with the falling snow. I'd hitched my horse outside Morrison's general store, thinking I'd be in and out, barbed wire, lamp oil, maybe some coffee if the price was fair. Then I heard the gavel. Lot 17, young female, age 19, comes with infant, fresh born this very morning. The crowd shifted, and I saw her. She was kneeling on that platform, bare knees against wood planks that had to be cold as creek ice. Her dress, if you could still call it that, was torn at the hem, soaked through with something dark that I realized too late was blood. Fresh blood, still wet, trailing from where she knelt down to a puddle freezing at the edge of the stage. An iron shackle bit into her right ankle, chained to a post like she was livestock. In her arms, wrapped in what looked like a flour sack, was a baby. Newborn. Couldn't have been more than a few hours old. The little thing's lips had that blue tinge I'd seen once before, on my own child, the one that didn't make it past his first breath. She's deaf, I thought, watching her eyes. They didn't track the auctioneer's voice. They stayed fixed on the baby, on her own hands trying to keep that flour sack tight. "Starting bid, $50, Clyde Farrow hollered from his perch. He was grinning like a man who'd just found money in an old coat. "She's damaged goods, I'll grant you, but she's young enough to mend, and that baby, well, a boy's a boy, could be useful in a few years." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not the good kind, the cruel kind that makes a man's stomach turn. "She ain't even stopped bleeding, Clyde," someone shouted. "Fresh as a spring calf," Clyde shot back. "Ain't every day you get to name a babe you didn't have to father." More laughter. I scanned the crowd, looking for anyone with sense enough to be ashamed. Found one man near the back, head down, shoulders shaking. Drunk, most likely. Then I recognized him. Vernon Crane, the girl's own father. 75, a voice called. 100 from the gentleman with the tobacco. The girl's eyes finally moved. She looked down at the baby, then up at the crowd, and her lips formed words I couldn't hear. But I didn't need to hear. I knew what a woman looks like when she's praying. My hand went to my coat pocket. $300. Money I'd saved for spring seed and a new plow. Money that was supposed to keep my ranch running another year. 150. The baby stopped moving. I watched that little bundle go still in her arms, and something in me snapped clean through. Not anger. I'd felt anger before. This was something colder. Something that sits in your chest like a stone and tells you there's lines a man don't cross, and watching a woman and baby die while you count your coins is one of them. $300. The square went quiet as a graveyard. Snow kept falling, landing on shoulders and hat brims, but nobody moved. Every head turned toward me. Clyde blinked like I'd slapped him. "Sir, I reckon you heard wrong." "I heard just fine," I said, stepping forward through the crowd. They parted like I was carrying plague. 300, cash money. "What's your intent with the merchandise, Drummond?" somebody called out. I recognized the voice. Carl Hensley, town busybody and self-appointed moral authority. I stopped at the base of the platform, looked Clyde dead in the eye, then let my gaze sweep the crowd, settled on Carl. "To give her a bed," I said. "To let her sleep, that's all." My hand rested on the Colt at my hip. Wasn't drawing, wasn't threatening, just letting it be known. "That's a hell of a price for charity," someone muttered. "Anyone want to top it?" I asked the crowd. Silence. No. Then I reckon we're done. Clyde's gavel came down like a gunshot. Sold. I climbed those steps, pulled my knife, and cut that shackle chain. It hit the wood with a sound like a bell tolling. The girl looked up at me, eyes wide, terrified. "You got a name?" I asked. Her lips moved, slow and careful, like she was remembering how. "Eliza." "I'm Silas," I said. "Can you stand?" She tried. Her legs gave out. I caught her before she hit the planks, wrapped my coat around her and that baby both. Behind me, Beatrice Holloway pushed through the crowd, shotgun in hand and fury in her eyes. "Silas Drummond," she hissed. "You're the biggest damn fool in Montana." "Reckon I am," I said, lifting Eliza like she weighed nothing. "But I'm a warm fool with a wagon." I turned to leave, and that's when I saw Vernon Crane finally looking up from his shame. "She ain't worth it, Drummond," he slurred. I stopped, looked at him, saw the yellow in his eyes, the tremor in his hands, the hollow where a father should have been. "Then you ain't worth the air you're breathing," I said. I carried her down those steps while the town watched in silence. Got her settled in my wagon, baby still blue-lipped and quiet in her arms. Beatrice climbed up beside me, set her shotgun across her lap. "That baby's dying, Silas," she whispered. "You got maybe an hour." I snapped the reins. "Then we better make it quick." The wagon struggled through snowdrifts deep enough to swallow a man's boots. Wind cut across the open prairie like a skinning knife, and I kept one eye on Eliza, watching for signs she was slipping away. She hadn't moved since we left town, just sat there holding that baby against her chest, rocking slow like she was trying to remember a song. Beatrice rode beside us, her mare picking careful steps through the white. "How far to your place?" she asked. "5 miles? Maybe 6 in this weather." "She won't make 6. Then she'll make 5, I said, and snapped the reins harder. My ranch sat in a shallow valley where the wind couldn't reach quite as mean. Single cabin, barn, a few outbuildings I'd patched together over the years. Wasn't much, but the stove worked and the roof didn't leak more than it should. I pulled the wagon right up to the door, lifted Eliza down before the wheels even stopped rolling. She weighed nothing, like carrying a bundle of kindling wrapped in cloth. Inside, I kicked the stove door open, shoved in 3 logs without bothering to be gentle about it. Fire first. Always fire first. I laid her on the cot near the stove, and that's when I got my first good look at the baby. Blue. Everywhere blue. Lips, fingernails, the tiny creases around his eyes. "He ain't breathing," Beatrice said behind me. My hands moved before my head caught up. I remembered, not from joy, but from loss. My own boy, born blue just like this one, my wife bleeding out on sheets we'd never get clean again. The midwife had tried, breathed into his little mouth, pressed his chest, but it hadn't taken. This time, maybe. I wiped the baby's mouth with a clean rag, bent down, and breathed. Once, twice, 3 times. Gentle, like blowing on coals. Nothing. Pressed his chest with 2 fingers. So small, so damn small. Breathed again. The baby gasped, choked, then wailed, thin and reedy but alive. Sound I'd never heard from my own son. Eliza's eyes went wide. Tears came silent, rolling down her cheeks into the flour sack. She reached for the baby and I gave him back, watched her pull him close like she was afraid I'd take him away again. "She needs tending," Beatrice said, already rolling up her sleeves. "Boil water, find clean cloth, and Silas, you need to leave." I started to argue. "Now," Beatrice said. "This ain't a place for men." I stepped out onto the porch, closed the door behind me. The snow had let up some, and the night was coming down hard and dark. I could hear Beatrice moving around inside, murmuring things I couldn't make out. Once, Eliza made a sound. Not quite a cry, more like someone who'd forgotten how to make noise and was remembering against her will. I sat on the porch steps, rifle across my knees, and waited. An hour passed, maybe 2. The door opened and Beatrice came out, wiping her hands on a rag that had gone pink with water and blood. "She'll live," Beatrice said. "Baby too, if we keep him warm. But Silas—" "I know. Do you?" She sat beside me, heavy. "Town's gonna come for her." Clyde paid good money in that ledger of his, legal or not, and Vernon's got drink courage building up. They'll say you stole property, harboring immorality, corrupting Christian values. Let them say it. They'll do more than say it. She pulled her coat tighter. I've seen this before. Men get righteous when they're afraid of looking weak, and you just made every man in that square look weak. Inside, through the window, I could see Eliza sitting up now. She'd found the slate and chalk I kept for figuring, and she was writing something. Slow, careful. Her hand shook, but she kept going. What's she writing? Beatrice asked. Don't know. Can't read it from here. Beatrice stood, dusted snow off her skirts. I'll come back tomorrow with supplies, medicine, maybe some clothes that'll fit her better than that rag she's wearing. Beatrice, don't thank me yet. She unhitched her mare, climbed up. This ain't over. It's barely started. She rode off into the dark, and I sat there listening to the night. Coyotes somewhere west. Wind rattling the barn door I'd been meaning to fix. And underneath it all, quiet as a prayer, the sound of a baby breathing. I stood, went back inside. Eliza was still writing on the slate. When she heard the door, she looked up, quick, startled, then held out the slate for me to see. 3 words, written in a child's careful hand. Why save me? I took the chalk from her, wrote underneath, because nobody else would. She stared at those words for a long time, then she wrote again. Will they come? I didn't have to ask who she meant. Yes, I wrote. She pulled the baby closer. Outside, the wind picked up, and in the distance, faint but getting clearer, I heard it. Hoofbeats, multiple, coming fast despite the snow. I stood, grabbed my rifle, moved to the window. Torches. At least 6 of them, moving through the dark like angry fireflies. Stay inside, I said to Eliza, knowing she couldn't hear me. I wrote it on the slate instead. Stay inside. Lock the door. She read it, and her hand went to something hidden in the baby's blanket. When she pulled it out, I saw the knife. Small, but sharp enough. She'd been carrying it all along. Smart girl. I stepped onto the porch. The torches were closer now, close enough to see the faces behind them. Vernon Crane in front, swaying drunk in his saddle. Behind him, 5 others, all armed. They stopped 20 yards out. Steam rose from the horses. Snow fell between us. Drummond! Vernon's voice cracked on my name. Send her out. She's mine by rights. My blood, my debt, my decision. I cocked the rifle. The sound carried clear across the snow. Your rights ended when you sold her, Vernon, I called back. Go home. Can't do that. This from another rider, Carl Hensley. You're harboring immorality, Silas. A bastard child under your roof, against God's law and man's. Funny, I said. I don't recall God showing up at that auction. The torches shifted. Horses stamped nervous. Vernon raised a bottle, took a pull. She's property, Drummond. I own her debt, and Clyde owns the contract. I stepped down off the porch, into the snow, raised the rifle to my shoulder. She ain't property, I said, voice dropping to something cold and final. Not while I'm breathing. Now you got 10 seconds to clear my land before I decide you're trespassing in a way that requires burying. The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. 4. Snow falling between us like ash from a fire nobody could put out. Then Beatrice's voice cut through the dark. Make that 2 guns, Vernon. She came walking out of the shadows beyond my barn, shotgun braced against her shoulder like she was born holding it. Her gray hair had come loose from its pins, wild around her face in the torchlight. And mine's loaded with rock salt, she added. You'll be picking it out your backside till spring thaw. Vernon's horse sidestepped nervous. The men behind him shifted, uncertain. Drunk courage only goes so far when you're staring down double barrels. This ain't your business, Beatrice, Carl called out. Became my business when I delivered that baby, she shot back. You want to tell me it's God's will to let a newborn freeze? Go on, say it to my face. Nobody said it. Vernon swayed in his saddle, bottle still in hand. For a moment, I thought he might fall. Drunk and angry is a dangerous combination, but drunk and ashamed is worse. A man'll do anything to avoid looking at his own reflection. Law's on my side, Drummond, he slurred. Clyde's got papers. Judge'll back him. You're just delaying the inevitable. Then let the law come, I said. But you're done here. Now ride off before I decide that trespassing at night with weapons constitutes a threat worth answering permanent like. Carl spat in the snow. This ain't over. Never is, I said. The torches turned slow, like the men carrying them were giving me time to change my mind. I didn't. They rode back toward town, taking their light with them, leaving us in darkness broken only by the lamp glow from my cabin window. Beatrice lowered her shotgun, let out a breath that steamed in the cold. That bought you maybe a day, she said. 2 if you're lucky. I know. Clyde'll go to Judge Crenshaw. They'll come back with a warrant and a federal marshal. Then it won't matter how many guns we got. I looked back at the cabin. Through the window I could see Eliza standing now, baby pressed to her shoulder. She was watching us. Couldn't hear a word we'd said, but she knew. You don't survive what she'd survived without learning to read danger in the set of a man's shoulders. She saw all that, Beatrice said quietly. Yeah. And she's still standing there, looking at you like you're the only solid thing in a world that's trying to shake her loose. I turned away from the cabin, couldn't quite meet Beatrice's eyes. I ain't nothing special. Special enough to put $300 in your life between her and that mob. She shifted the shotgun to her other shoulder. You know what your problem is, Silas? I'm sure you'll tell me. You think saving one person don't matter because you couldn't save the ones before. Your wife, your baby. But here's the truth. Eliza ain't them. And you ain't the same man you were when they died. The words hit harder than I expected. I gripped the rifle tighter, felt the cold metal through my gloves. Beatrice? I'm going home, she said, cutting me off before I could get sentimental. But I'll be back come morning, with supplies and whatever news I can gather from town. She started to leave, then stopped. One more thing. That girl in there, she's stronger than you think. I saw it when I was tending her wounds. She's got steel in her spine, Silas. Just needs someone to remind her it's there. I watched Beatrice ride off into the dark, then stood there a while longer, listening to the night settle. The wind had died down some. Snow was lighter now, almost gentle. When I finally went back inside, I found Eliza sitting at my table, the baby asleep in a nest of blankets she'd made from my spare bedding. She'd found my spare shirt, too big for her by half, and changed into it. The bloody dress was folded neat in the corner, like she couldn't bring herself to throw it away but couldn't bear to look at it either. She had the slate again. When I closed the door, she held it up. You risked your life. For strangers. I took the chalk, thought about what to write, settled on truth. Not strangers anymore. She stared at the words, then at me. Something shifted in her eyes. Not trust exactly, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. She reached out, slow and careful, and touched my arm. Just her fingertips, light as snow landing. Then pulled back quick, like she'd surprised herself. Thank you, she wrote. I nodded, not knowing what else to do. Set my rifle by the door, hung my coat on the hook. You should sleep, I said, then remembered and wrote it instead. Where? The cot. It's yours now. Where will you sleep? I pointed to the chair by the stove. She frowned, started to write something, but I held up my hand. I'm keeping watch, I wrote. Someone has to. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded, gathered up the baby, and went to the cot, moving like her whole body ached. Probably did. She'd given birth in chains and walked through snow and survived an auction block. A few hours' rest wouldn't fix that, but it was a start. I settled into the chair, rifle across my lap, and watched the fire burn low. Outside, the wind picked up again, and underneath it, so faint I almost missed it, hoofbeats. Single rider this time, coming fast. I stood, moved to the window. A horse and rider appeared from the darkness, coming straight for my cabin. When they got close enough, I saw the badge catching lamplight. Marshal Elwood Pike, federal law, riding alone at midnight. He dismounted, tied his horse, and walked to my door like a man carrying bad news. I opened it before he could knock. "Silas," he said, voice tired, regretful. "We need to talk." "About?" He pulled a folded paper from his coat. Even in the dim light, I could see the territorial seal. Clyde Farrow filed ownership papers, made it federal. That girl's legally his under territorial indenture law. He paused. "I got orders to bring her in by noon tomorrow. You don't surrender her, I arrest you both. And the baby goes to territorial orphanage in Helena." My hand tightened on the doorframe. "And if I don't?" I asked, though I already knew. Marshal Elwood met my eyes. 30 years of law enforcement in that gaze, and not a bit of joy. "Then I come back with deputies, and nobody wins." The marshal left just before dawn, taking the federal order with him, but leaving the weight of it behind. I sat in that chair by the stove, watching the last embers glow, trying to figure how to tell a woman who'd just found safety that the law was coming to drag her back. Eliza woke when the baby stirred. I watched her in the gray morning light, the way she checked him first, counting fingers like she did every time he made a sound, making sure he was real and whole and still breathing. Only then did she look at me. She saw it in my face, the defeat, the calculation of impossible odds. Her hand went to the slate. "What happened?" I took the chalk, wrote it plain. Marshall came. Clyde filed papers. Federal law. "You and baby go back by noon or we both hang." She read it twice. Her face didn't change. Not surprise, not fear, just acceptance, like she'd been expecting this all along, like freedom was always going to be temporary. She wrote, "Let me go. Save yourself." I slid the slate back, wrote harder than I meant to. "Not happening. Why die for strangers?" I stared at that question, thought about my wife's face going pale, my son's lips turning blue, the midwife's voice saying there was nothing more to be done. Thought about standing in that square yesterday, watching another woman bleed while men made bids. "You ain't strangers anymore," I wrote. She looked at those words for a long time. Then she stood, walked to the window, baby on her hip. The sun was coming up weak and cold, painting the snow pink. She wrote something new. "I've been property before. I survived it. I can survive it again." "No," I said out loud, forgetting she couldn't hear. I grabbed the slate from her, wrote so fast the chalk squeaked. "That ain't surviving. That's dying slow. I won't let it happen. You can't stop federal law. Watch me." A knock at the door. Not the marshal's official rap. This was familiar. Beatrice's rhythm. I let her in. She had a bundle under her arm, snow in her hair from fresh fall snow. "Town's already talking," she said, shaking snow from her coat. "Clyde's at the saloon, buying drinks and telling everyone how he's getting his property back. Legal-like. Marshal Pike's word against a rancher's charity case." She saw Eliza, softened her voice. "How's she holding up?" "Better than me." Beatrice set down her bundle, clothes, food, medicine. "I brought what I could. But Silas, we need to talk. Private." Outside, the wind had picked up. Dark clouds building west. "Storm's coming," Beatrice said. "Big one. Maybe that's a blessing." "How's a storm a blessing?" "Because I talked to Marshal Pike last night, after he left here." She pulled her coat tight. "He came to me first, before coming to you, asked about Clyde's paperwork." My chest tightened with something that might have been hope. "And?" "Clyde's claim is built on Vernon's authority as father. But there's a problem." She looked at me hard. "Eliza's mother left a will. Filed in Helena, 1875, named me as legal guardian when Eliza turned 18. When did she turn 18? 6 months ago." I let that sink in. So Vernon had no right to sell what he didn't own. Exactly. Which means Clyde's papers are worthless. But she held up a hand before I could celebrate. "The will's in Helena, 3 days' ride in good weather, 5 or more in this storm. Marshall won't wait 5 days." "I know. That's why he gave you till noon. He's stalling best he can." I looked back at the cabin. Eliza was visible through the window, rocking the baby. So we ride to Helena, get the will. In a blizzard? With a woman who just gave birth and a newborn? Beatrice shook her head. You won't make 10 miles. Then I go alone. You hide Eliza and the baby here. Clyde'll tear this place apart looking for her. An idea formed, desperate and half mad. Not if he thinks she's with me. I'll make a decoy, bundle up blankets in the wagon, make it look like a woman and child from a distance. Lead them away from here, into the mountains. They'll kill you when they figure it out. Maybe, but it'll buy you time to get Eliza somewhere safe. Beatrice studied my face. You're serious. As a grave. She was quiet a moment. Then, there's something else you should know. Something I saw when I was tending her wounds last night. What? The baby. He's got a birthmark, right side of his neck, shaped like a star. She paused. Marshall Elwood Pike's got the same mark. His father had it. His grandfather, too. It's a family trait. The world tilted. You're saying, I'm saying that baby is the Marshall's blood. He doesn't know it yet. But if we tell him, if he claims the child as his own, he could adopt Eliza as family, void Clyde's claim through kinship rights. Maybe, if he's willing. Beatrice gripped my arm. But Silas, that means telling him he's got a son he never knew about, with a woman he probably don't even remember, a deaf girl sold at auction. That's a hell of a thing to lay on a man. Inside the cabin, Eliza had set the baby down, was writing something on the slate. When she saw us looking, she held it up to the window. I know who the father is. Beatrice and I went back inside. Eliza handed me the slate. New words there. Marshall Pike. One night, 2 years ago. He doesn't know. Does he need to know? Beatrice asked. Eliza took the slate back, wrote carefully. He has a right. And maybe he can help. I looked at the baby. Oswin, she'd been calling him in her mind. I'd seen her lips form the name. He had Pike's jaw already. His nose. How had I not seen it? I'll tell him, I said. But first we need to keep you both alive till noon. That's when we heard it. Not hoofbeats this time. Wagon wheels, multiple. Coming from town. I moved to the window. Through the morning light and fresh snow, I saw them. 5 wagons, maybe 20 men, all heading this way. Clyde Farrow in the lead, standing in his wagon bed like some kind of conquering general. Behind them, torches. In daylight. That meant one thing. They weren't planning to talk. They're early, Beatrice whispered. I checked my rifle, found my spare ammunition. Get Eliza and the baby to the root cellar, now. Silas. Now, Beatrice. Eliza had seen them too. She grabbed the baby, her eyes wide, not with fear, with fury. She wrote fast, I won't hide while you die. You ain't got a choice, I said, then wrote it for her. She wrote back, neither do you. And she pulled that knife from her belt, the one she'd been carrying all along, and stood beside me at the window. Outside, Clyde's wagon stopped 50 yards out. The men fanned out, forming a line. More torches lit. In daylight, during a snowstorm, they were planning to burn me out. Clyde stood in his wagon, arms spread wide like a preacher calling down judgment. Silas Drummond, his voice carried across the snow. You're harboring stolen property. Send out the girl and the bastard, and we'll let you walk away with your hide. I stepped onto the porch, rifle ready. Property don't breathe, Clyde, and she ain't yours. Federal marshal says different. I got papers. Papers built on lies, I called back. Vernon had no right to sell what wasn't his to give. That caused a stir among the men. Vernon himself wasn't with them, probably passed out drunk somewhere, drowning in shame. Don't matter what rights he had, Clyde shouted. I paid good money, transactions legal. Behind me, the door opened. Beatrice stepped out, then Eliza, still holding the knife, baby strapped to her chest with a shawl. I tried to wave her back inside, but she ignored me, stood right there beside me like she had every right. Maybe she did. Look at her, boys, Clyde gestured. It deaf and dumb, can't even speak for herself. How's she gonna raise a child? She needs a master, needs guidance. Eliza's hand moved. She wrote on the slate with sharp, angry strokes, then held it high for everyone to see. I am not dumb. I am not property. I am a person. The men shifted uncomfortably. One of them, young, maybe 20, lowered his torch. She can write, he said, surprised. Don't mean nothing, Clyde snapped. Law says. Law says a lot of things, a new voice cut in. Marshal Elwood Pike rode up from the side, his horse stepping careful through the deep snow. He positioned himself between my porch and Clyde's line of men. Marshal, Clyde grinned, thinking he had an ally. Tell him. Tell Drummond the girl's mine by legal contract. Pike dismounted slow, pulled a paper from his coat. About that contract, Clyde. I did some checking last night. Territorial Archives in Helena. My heart kicked up. Beatrice had said the will was in Helena, but we hadn't had time to. Turns out, Pike continued, Eliza Crane's mother filed a will in 1875, left custody of her daughter to Beatrice Holloway upon the girl's 18th birthday. He paused. Eliza turned 18 6 months ago, which means Vernon Crane had no legal authority to sign her over to you. Clyde's face went red. That's a lie. I checked the records. You checked Calico Ridge records, filed by your friend Judge Crenshaw. Pike's voice went hard. You didn't check territorial records, the ones that actually matter. The men behind Clyde started murmuring. Torches lowered. So the contract's void? Someone asked. Void, Pike confirmed. Clyde bought nothing, owns nothing. Girl's been free since her 18th birthday. I felt Eliza's hand grip my arm, hard enough to hurt. When I looked at her, tears were streaming down her face. Not sad tears. Something else. Something like relief, mixed with disbelief. Clyde wasn't done. Fine, maybe the contract's void. But Drummond still interfered with a legal auction. He still stole. He bought, Pike corrected. Paid full price. I was there. Saw the whole thing. He turned to face the men. Any of you want to dispute that? Silence. Didn't think so. Pike mounted his horse again, looked at me. Silas Drummond, you're free to go about your business. Miss Crane, you're under no legal obligation to anyone. Clyde sputtered. You can't. Marshal, your duty. My duty is to uphold the law, not protect fraud. Pike wheeled his horse. Now I suggest you boys head home before this storm gets worse. Clyde, you and I are going to have words about those papers you filed. Federal words. The men dispersed like smoke, grateful for the excuse to leave. Clyde stood alone in his wagon, shaking with rage but beaten. He pointed at me. This ain't over, Drummond, he hissed. You hear me? This ain't. It is, I said. Now get off my land. He spat in the snow, climbed into his wagon, and whipped his horses harder than necessary. They struggled through the drifts, pulling him away. When they were gone, Pike lingered. He looked at Eliza, really looked at her, and his expression changed, softened. Miss Crane, he said, I wonder if I might have a word about the child. Eliza's grip on my arm tightened. She knew. Somehow she knew what was coming. Beatrice stepped forward. Marshal, maybe we should go inside. This conversation needs privacy. We moved into the cabin. Pike stood by the stove, turning his hat in his hands like a schoolboy caught stealing apples. I need to know, he said. The baby. Is he? Eliza pulled the shawl back, revealing Oswin's face. The birthmark was visible on his neck. Small, star-shaped, unmistakable. Pike's breath caught. His hand went to his own neck, same spot. My grandfather had that mark, he whispered. My father. Me. Eliza wrote on the slate, 2 years ago, behind the church, after the harvest dance. You were kind to me. Pike's eyes closed. I remember. You couldn't hear the music, but you danced anyway. I thought. He opened his eyes, looked at her. Why didn't you tell me? You were Marshall. I was nobody. Who would believe me? I would have. His voice cracked. I would have believed you. Eliza wrote, would you have married me? A deaf girl with no family? The silence answered for him. Pike knelt beside the baby, touched Oswin's small hand with one finger. What's his name? Oswin. It means divine friend. Oswin Pike, the marshal said softly. My son. I started to leave, give them privacy, but Pike stood. Wait. Both of you wait. He looked between Eliza and me. There's something you need to know. Clyde might have lost today, but he won't stop. He's got pride and money and a judge in his pocket. What are you saying? Beatrice asked. I'm saying Clyde will find another way. He'll claim emotional damages or fraud or anything that lets him save face. Pike looked at Eliza. Unless you have protection he can't touch. What kind of protection? I asked. Pike pulled papers from his coat. Adoption papers. If I claim Eliza as family, as my son's mother, Clyde has no legal standing. Family rights supersede all debt claims under territorial law. Eliza stared at the papers. You would do that? I should have done it 2 years ago, Pike said. I can't change the past, but I can change what happens next. Eliza looked at me. I saw the question in her eyes. Can I trust this? I nodded. She looked at Pike, then Beatrice, then back at the papers. She took the chalk, wrote, Yes. Pike laid out the papers on the table. Sign here. Make your mark. Whatever you're comfortable with. Eliza's hand shook as she signed her name. Slow, careful letters. When she finished, Pike folded the papers away. It's done, he said. You're family now. Protected. That should have been the end. Should have been the moment we all exhaled. Then the door burst open. Clyde's man, the young one who'd lowered his torch, stood there, snow-covered and breathless. Drummond, he gasped. You gotta listen. Clyde didn't go back to town. He went to Judge Crenshaw. They're filing emergency injunction, claiming you kidnapped federal witness. They got riders heading to Fort Benton for Army support. Army? Beatrice said. For one girl? For principle, they're saying, to prove no man stands above law. The young man looked at me with pity. They're coming back tomorrow, with soldiers, and they're gonna hang you whether the girl goes free or not. The young man, name was Tommy Briggs, I learned later, stood in my doorway like he'd just outrun the devil himself. How long? I asked. Day, maybe 2 if the storm slows them. He looked at Eliza, then the baby. I'm sorry, Mr. Drummond. My pa's one of Clyde's men, but this ain't right. Calling the army over a girl and a baby, that's wrong. Why help us? Beatrice asked, suspicious. Tommy pulled off his hat, wrung it in his hands. Because I got a sister. She's deaf too. And if she was on that auction block, I'd pray someone like Mr. Drummond would do what he done. He looked at me. But you gotta run tonight, before they seal the roads. Run where? Pike asked. Fort Benton's north, Helena's east. Clyde's got men watching every trail. Not every trail. Tommy stepped inside, closed the door. Old Blackfeet path, west through the canyon, then north to the reservation. My ma's people know it. It ain't on any map. I looked at Eliza. She was pale, holding Oswin so tight the baby squirmed. Running meant days in a blizzard with a newborn. Staying meant hanging. Some choices ain't really choices at all. The reservation won't harbor fugitives, Pike said. Federal jurisdiction. Federal jurisdiction stops at tribal land, Tommy interrupted, and Chief Joseph's been looking for a reason to tell the government to go to hell. This might be it. Beatrice moved to the window, watching the storm build. It's suicide. Woman who just gave birth, a newborn, this weather. Staying suicide too, I said. At least running gives us a chance. Pike was quiet, thinking. Then, I'll go with you. We all turned. Marshal, Beatrice said, you'd lose everything. Your badge, your pension. I already lost everything that mattered. He looked at Oswin. 20 years I've been alone. Now I got a son, and I'll be damned if I let the army take him before I even get to know him. Eliza wrote on her slate, showed it to Pike. You would do this? Give up your life. I'd give up more than that, he he said. He's my blood. You're his mother. That makes you family. And I don't abandon family. Something passed between them then. Not love, not yet, but understanding. Recognition of shared purpose. We leave it dark, I said. Pack light, food, blankets, ammunition. Tommy nodded. I'll bring horses from my pa's stable, good mountain breeds, and I'll spread word in town that you headed east toward Helena, give you a head start. Why risk it? I asked. Your pa finds out. He'll tan your hide. Let him. Tommy set his hat back on. Some things are worth a tanning. He left quick as he'd come. We spent the afternoon preparing, sorting supplies, wrapping Oswin in every warm thing we could find, checking weapons. The storm outside grew teeth, wind howling like something alive and angry. Just before dusk, another knock. I grabbed my rifle, but Beatrice touched my arm. It's all right, she said. I know that knock. She opened the door. Old Joseph stood there, snow gathered on his shoulders like a white buffalo robe. He carried a bundle wrapped in deer hide. Silas Drummond, he said in that slow, careful way of his. The wind speaks of your trouble. Joseph, this ain't your fight. All fights are my fight when they concern dignity. He stepped inside, set the bundle on the table. My people have walked this land when yours were still across the ocean. We know paths the government don't, ways through winter that don't kill. He unwrapped the bundle. Inside, dried meat, pemmican, herbs, and a map drawn on tanned hide. This is the old way to our winter grounds, he said, pointing to marks on the hide. 3 days if you're strong, 4 with a child. There are caves here. He touched a symbol, and here, sheltered, with stored wood for fires. Why help us? Pike asked. Joseph looked at him with eyes that had seen more winters than any of us. Because 30 years ago, a white rancher gave my daughter shelter when she ran from a bad marriage. Kept her safe till her husband's anger cooled. That rancher was Silas's father. He looked at me. Debts passed down, same as blood. I didn't know that story. Never heard my father mention it. He never told you because he didn't do it for glory, Joseph said, reading my face. He did it because it was right. Now I do the same. Eliza touched Joseph's arm, pointed to herself, then to him, then made a gesture I didn't understand. Joseph smiled. She asks if I will teach her the signs, our sign language, so she can speak with her hands. He turned to her, made several gestures. She watched careful, then copied them. Joseph nodded approval. She's quick, he said. Good. You'll need to communicate silent in the mountains. We worked till full dark, packing, planning, Joseph showing us the route. Pike melted snow for water, filled every canteen we had. Beatrice wrapped food tight against the cold. I checked the rifles, counted ammunition. We were as ready as we'd ever be. Then the window shattered. Glass exploded inward, and with it a burning torch. It landed on my cot, caught the blanket immediate. Flames spread fast. Outside, laughter, hoofbeats. Clyde's voice, drunk and vicious. Burn them out, boys! They can't hide in ashes! More torches came through the windows. The cabin filled with smoke. Oswin started crying, that thin, desperate wail of a newborn in distress. Back door! I shouted, grabbing Eliza. Now! Pike scooped up what supplies he could. Beatrice and Joseph were already moving. We stumbled through smoke toward the back of the cabin, flames chasing us like judgment itself. I kicked the back door open. Cold air and smoke mixed, choking. We ran into the storm, into darkness, into winter with nothing but what we could carry. Behind us, my cabin, my home of 15 years, became a torch against the night sky. Clyde's men were circling, cutting off escape routes. We were trapped between fire and riders, between burning and freezing. Then, from the darkness beyond my barn, horses appeared, 6 of them. Tommy Briggs leading them, face grim. Mount up, he yelled. I'll hold them off. Tommy, they'll kill you. They'll try. He pulled a rifle from his saddle. Now ride, damn it, ride. We mounted fast, Eliza with Oswin, Pike behind her to keep them steady. Beatrice and Joseph each on their own horse. I swung up on the last one, looked back at Tommy. The kid was 17, 18 maybe, too young for this. Thank you, I said. He grinned, reckless and brave and foolish. Thank me by living. Now go. We rode into the storm. Behind us, gunfire, shouting. Tommy Briggs buying our escape with everything he had. The snow swallowed us whole, and the last thing I saw was my cabin burning like a funeral pyre, lighting up the night with everything I'd lost. But ahead, in the darkness, was everything I'd found. We rode north toward the mountains, toward tribal land, toward whatever judgment waited at the end of this frozen road. 3 days we rode through hell's own country. The storm chased us like something with teeth, and twice we thought we'd lost the trail. Joseph led, reading signs in the snow none of us could see. A rock formation here, a bent tree there, landmarks his people had used for generations. Oswin cried till he had no voice left. Eliza wrapped him against her skin, trying to share what warmth she had. Pike rode close, shielding them both from the worst of the wind. Beatrice's lips went blue, but she never complained, just kept riding. On the third night, we reached the winter grounds. Joseph's people took us in without question, fed us, gave us shelter, asked nothing in return. We slept for the first time since the fire, deep and dreamless. But peace don't last when you're running from the law. They came at dawn on the fourth day. Not soldiers. Worse. Federal marshals, a dozen of them, with Judge Crenshaw riding alongside like he had authority on tribal land. Chief Joseph, different from old Joseph, the elder's nephew, met them at the boundary stones. "This is sovereign territory," the chief said, his English perfect and cold. "You have no jurisdiction here." "We have federal jurisdiction everywhere," Judge Crenshaw wheezed from his horse. "And we're here for fugitives, Silas Drummond, Eliza Crane, and Marshal Elwood Pike, wanted for destruction of property, evading arrest, and conspiracy." "They're under our protection," the chief said. "Your protection means nothing." Crenshaw pulled papers from his coat. "Presidential order, signed and sealed. You surrender them, or we come in and take them." I stepped forward from where I'd been standing with Eliza and Pike. "I'll go. Just leave them be." "Silas, no," Beatrice started. "It's me they want," I said. "For burning my own cabin, for running. The rest were just helping." "Let them go," Crenshaw smiled, ugly and triumphant. "Noble, but wrong. You're all coming, every last one of you." The marshals moved forward. The Blackfeet warriors stepped in front of them, blocking the way. For a moment, I thought blood would spill right there. Then old Joseph stepped between both groups. "There is another way," he said quietly. "An old law, older than your government." "What law?" Crenshaw scoffed. "Tribal court," old Joseph said. "We have treaty right to try crimes committed on our land. These people came here, sought refuge. That makes it our jurisdiction." One of the federal marshals, older, grizzled, nodded slowly. "He's right. Treaty of 55. Tribal courts have authority over refuges on reservation land." Crenshaw's face went red. That can't." "It's federal law," the marshal said. "You want to argue with federal law, Judge?" Crenshaw sputtered, then rallied. "Fine. Tribal court. But I sit as observer." "Make sure it's conducted proper." Chief Joseph looked at old Joseph, then at me. "You understand, tribal court means tribal justice. Our ways, not yours. You accept this?" I looked at Eliza. She held Oswin tight, her eyes asking me what to do. "We accept," I said. They built a council fire in the center of the village. The whole tribe gathered, men, women, children. The federal marshals stood at the edges, observers only. Crenshaw sat fuming, but powerless. Chief Joseph presided, with old Joseph and two other elders beside him. "Silas Drummond," the chief began, "you are accused of destruction of property, evading federal law, and endangering a woman and child by bringing them into Winter Mountains. How do you answer?" I stood, guilty of all of it, and I'd do it again. Murmurs through the crowd. "Eliza Crane," the chief continued, "you are accused of abandoning legal obligation and conspiring to evade justice. How do you answer?" Eliza stood, handed Oswin to Beatrice. She pulled out her slate, wrote carefully, then held it high for all to see. I was never property. I am guilty only of wanting to live free. More murmurs. Some of the Blackfeet women nodded. Marshal Elwood Pike, you are accused of abandoning your duty and aiding fugitives. How do you answer? Pike stood tall. Guilty. My duty is to justice, not to bad law. I chose justice. The chief conferred with the elders in their own language. The conversation went on for long minutes. Crenshaw kept trying to interrupt, but the federal marshal beside him kept pushing him back down. Finally, Chief Joseph stood. We have heard the accusations, we have heard the answers, now we hear testimony. He gestured. Who speaks for these people? Old Joseph stood. I do. This man, he pointed at me, paid a debt his father owed, a debt of protection. He saw injustice and acted. That is not crime. That is honor. Beatrice stood next. I speak for the woman. She was sold like cattle. No law that allows such a thing deserves respect. Tommy Briggs stepped from the crowd. I hadn't even known he'd followed us. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. I speak for all of them, he said, voice rough. They done what the rest of us was too scared to do. Stand up when it mattered. Lies! Crenshaw jumped up. All lies. That girl is legally... Legally what? A new voice called. Vernon Crane stumbled into the circle, sober for once, or near enough. His face was haggard, aged 10 years in 3 days. Vernon, Crenshaw hissed, sit down. You're drunk. I'm sober enough to tell the truth. Vernon looked at Eliza and his eyes filled. My daughter was never Clyde's to sell. Her mother's will left her to Beatrice Holloway. I knew it. Clyde knew it. We lied. The crowd erupted. Even the federal marshals stirred. Vernon, shut your mouth! Crenshaw stood, face purple. I'm done shutting my mouth. Vernon turned to the chief. Clyde Farrow paid me to forge guardianship papers, paid Judge Crenshaw to notarize them. All of it's fraud, every bit. That's slander, Crenshaw shouted. Vernon pulled papers from his coat, crumpled, stained, but readable. Here's the proof, the real will, and Clyde's ledger showing payments to me and the judge. He handed them to Chief Joseph. The chief read, his expression darkening. This shows conspiracy, the chief said. Fraud, human trafficking. The federal marshal stepped forward, took the papers, read them himself, looked at Crenshaw. Judge Cornelius Crenshaw, you're under arrest for corruption and conspiracy to commit fraud. You can't arrest me. I'm a territorial judge. Not anymore. The marshal gestured to his men. Take him. They dragged Crenshaw away, still shouting. Vernon stood there, empty, like a man who'd finally set down a weight too heavy to carry. Eliza walked to him, stood close. Wrote on her slate, why now? Why tell the truth? Vernon's voice broke. Because I looked at that baby and saw your mother's eyes, and I knew she'd never forgive me if I let this stand. He looked at her. Can you forgive me? Eliza stared at him for a long moment, then wrote, I forgive you, but I'm not yours anymore. I'm my own. Vernon nodded, tears streaming. That's all I wanted to hear. Chief Joseph stood again. The testimony reveals fraud. The accusations against these people are built on lies. Therefore, a shot rang out. Vernon fell, blood spreading across his chest. Behind him, Clyde Farrow stood with a smoking pistol, eyes wild. If I can't have her, nobody can, Clyde screamed. He aimed at Eliza. Pike moved faster than thought, throwing himself in front of her. The second shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him down. I drew my Colt, fired, caught Clyde in the leg. He went down howling. The federal marshals swarmed him, disarmed him, dragged him back. But the damage was done. Vernon lay dying in the snow. Eliza dropped beside him, hands pressed to the wound. He looked up at her, tried to speak. She touched his face, tears falling. He smiled, weak. Your mother, he whispered. Tell her. I'm sorry. Then he was gone. Eliza held him, this father who'd failed her, saved her, failed her again, and finally, done one right thing. She rocked him like a child, silent sobs shaking her shoulders. Pike sat up, blood soaking his coat. "I'm all right," he said through gritted teeth. "Flesh wound." Beatrice was already there, tearing cloth for bandages. Chief Joseph stood over Clyde, who writhed in the snow. "You have violated sacred ground with murder," the chief said, voice like stone. "Federal law or not, you will answer to ours." He looked at me, at Eliza, at the chaos Clyde had wrought. "But first, we finish this trial. And we do it right." They buried Vernon Crane that evening, in ground so frozen they had to build fires to soften the earth. Eliza stood over the grave, baby in her arms, and made no sound. Tears froze on her cheeks before they could fall. Pike stood beside her, one arm in a sling, the other around her shoulders. Not romantic, just steady, the way family stands. I watched from a distance, feeling every one of my 47 years. Tommy Briggs came up beside me, face still swollen from whatever beating Clyde's men had given him before he escaped. "You think she'll be all right?" he asked. "Eventually," I said. "Grief's got its own timeline. Can't rush it, can't outrun it, just gotta walk through it." Chief Joseph approached, old Joseph beside him. "The trial resumes at dawn," he said. "Clyde Farrow will face us first, for murder on sacred ground. Then you. The marshals agree to honor our judgment." "What about Crenshaw?" "Federal custody. They're taking him to Helena to answer for the fraud." The chief paused. "But there's something you should know. We found something when we searched Clyde's belongings." He handed me a leather journal, small, worn, filled with cramped handwriting. "What is it?" "A ledger. Names, dates, transactions." Old Joseph's voice was grave. "Clyde's been doing this for years, buying debts, selling people. 8 families that we can find, maybe more." I opened it, page after page of human beings reduced to numbers, purchase price, sale price, profit margin, like livestock at market. "Sweet God," I whispered. "There's more," the chief said. "One of the names, the most recent before Eliza, was my cousin's daughter. She disappeared 2 years ago. We thought she'd run off, but here," he pointed to an entry, "sold to a mining camp in Idaho for $300. My stomach turned. "You think she's still alive?" "We're sending riders to find out." The chief's jaw tightened. "But Clyde will answer for this. All of it." That night, I couldn't sleep. Sat by the fire in the lodge they'd given us, watching shadows dance on the hide walls. Eliza came and sat beside me, Oswin asleep against her shoulder. She had the slate. Wrote, "Can't sleep either. Too much thinking," I wrote back. "What are you thinking about?" I hesitated, then wrote the truth. How many others? How many we didn't save? She read it, was quiet for a long moment, then wrote, "You saved me. That matters. One person against 8 families, against years of this." Eliza took the chalk from my hand, wrote firmly, "One person is everything when you're that person." I looked at her, this woman who'd been sold like cattle, who'd given birth in chains, who'd lost her father just as he'd finally found his courage, and she was comforting me. "You're stronger than you know," I said out loud, forgetting she couldn't hear. But she read my lips, smiled sad, and wrote, "So are you." The trial began at first light. The whole village gathered again, but this time the atmosphere was different. Heavier, angrier. They brought Clyde out in chains. His leg was bandaged, but infection had set in. Fever made his eyes glassy. He swayed on his feet. Chief Joseph held up the ledger. "Clyde Farrow, you stand accused of murder, but that is not all." He opened the book, began reading names. Each one hit like a hammer blow. Sarah Running Bear, sold for $200. James Whitmore, sold for $150. Rebecca Chen, sold for $300. On and on. 16 names in total. The crowd grew restless. Angry murmurs became shouts. Clyde's face went from red to white. "Those were legal transactions, all of them. Debt collection." "Slavery by another name," old Joseph said quietly. The federal marshal stepped forward. "Actually, it's worse than that." He held up papers. "We found correspondence in Judge Crenshaw's office. Letters between him and Clyde going back 5 years. They were partners. Crenshaw would rule in Clyde's favor, declare people in debt, and Clyde would sell them. They split the profits. The crowd erupted. Even the other federal marshals looked sick. But there's more, the marshal continued. Crenshaw was also taking bribes from the buyers, mining companies, lumber camps, even some ranchers. They'd pay extra for workers they could list as indentured servants instead of employees. No wages, no rights. I felt rage building in my chest like a fire. How high does this go? High enough. The marshal's face was grim. We're finding connections to territorial officials, maybe even governor's office. This isn't just Clyde and Crenshaw, it's a network. Beatrice stood up from where she'd been sitting, and I can prove it. All eyes turned to her. She pulled a packet of letters from her coat. 5 years ago, I delivered a baby for a woman who died in childbirth. Before she passed, she gave me these, said if anything happened to her, I should keep them safe. I didn't understand why at the time. She handed them to the marshal. He read, his expression darkening with each page. These are from Territorial Governor Ainsworth's office, he said slowly, authorizing special labor contracts for development projects, signed by, he looked up, shocked, signed by the governor's chief of staff. Wallace Brennan, Beatrice said, Crenshaw's brother-in-law. The pieces fell into place like a puzzle made of horror. This wasn't just corruption, it was systematic. Territorial officials creating laws that allowed debt slavery, judges enforcing them, men like Clyde doing the dirty work. How many? I asked, voice rough. How many people total? The marshal flipped through Clyde's ledger, calculating. Based on this, maybe 200 over 5 years, maybe more if other towns are involved. 200 people. Sold, scattered, disappeared into mines and camps and places where no one asked questions. Chief Joseph stood. This changes everything. This is not just murder. This is not just fraud. This is genocide by another name. The systematic destruction of families, communities, lives. He turned to the federal marshals. You will take this evidence to Washington. You will demand a full investigation. And you will bring every man involved to justice. We will, the marshal said. You have my word. And Clyde Farrow? The chief asked, looking at the man who'd started it all. He faces tribal justice first, the marshal said, for Vernon Crane's murder, then federal charges. The chief nodded, turned to the council of elders. They conferred in their language, quick, decisive. Clyde Farrow, the chief pronounced, you are found guilty of murder on sacred ground. The sentence is exile. You will be taken to the territorial line and forbidden to return. If you cross into our lands again, the penalty is death. And for the trafficking? Someone called from the crowd. Federal court will handle that, the marshal said. I promise you, he'll hang for it. Clyde collapsed, either from fever or fear. They dragged him away. The chief turned to me, to Eliza, to Pike. Now we address your case, he said. But the context has changed. You were not fleeing justice. You were fleeing injustice. You were not criminals. You were victims of a corrupt system. He looked at the gathered marshals. Do you agree? The lead marshal nodded slowly. In light of new evidence, yes. All charges against Silas Drummond, Eliza Crane, and Marshal Elwood Pike are dropped. They're free to go. The crowd cheered. Beatrice grabbed my arm, squeezed hard. Tommy whooped. Old Joseph nodded, satisfied. But I felt empty. Free, yes. Cleared, yes. But 200 people were still out there, still enslaved, still suffering. Eliza touched my hand. Wrote on her slate, we can't save them all, but we can start. How? She wrote, by telling the truth, by being witness, by not letting the world forget. Pike stepped forward. The marshal's right. We need to find those people. Every name in that ledger. Track them down. Bring them home. That could take years, Beatrice said. Then it takes years, Pike replied. He looked at Oswin in Eliza's arms. I want my son to grow up in a world where people aren't property. That starts with us. I looked at all of them. This family we'd built from fire and snow and desperation. Tommy, barely more than a boy, ready to ride into hell for what was right. Beatrice, who'd risked everything to stand with us. Old Joseph and his people, who'd given us shelter when the world wanted us dead. Pike, who'd traded his badge for his son. And Eliza, who'd survived being sold and still had strength enough to think about saving others. All right, I said. We start searching, one name at a time. We bring them home. Chief Joseph smiled. Then you will have our help, our riders, our resources. We will not rest until every stolen person is found. The council dissolved. People scattered to prepare. But as they did, one of the tribal scouts came running. Chief, riders approaching from the east. Army patrol, 50 men, maybe more. My blood went cold. I thought the marshals had jurisdiction. They do, the lead marshal said grimly. But someone must have called in the army before we resolved this. And army orders don't change just because we did. Pike gripped his rifle. How long? Hour, maybe less. We all looked at each other, free by tribal law, free by the marshal's word, but the army didn't answer to either. They'll take us anyway, Beatrice said. Army don't care about jurisdiction disputes. Chief Joseph's jaw set. Then we make them care. How? I asked. He smiled, fierce and certain. By showing them what happens when you threaten people under our protection. He turned to his warriors, began giving orders in Blackfeet. They scattered, running for weapons, for horses. What are you doing? The federal marshal asked, alarmed. What we should have done long ago, Chief Joseph said, standing our ground. The army came like a dark line across the snow, 50 men on horseback, rifles gleaming in the morning sun. They stopped at the boundary stones, formed a line. An officer rode forward, young, stiff-backed, holding a document. I am Captain Wesley Howard, United States Army, he called. I have orders to apprehend fugitives Silas Drummond, Eliza Crane, and former Marshal Elwood Pike. Surrender them immediately or face federal intervention. Chief Joseph rode out to meet him, flanked by 20 warriors. Behind them, the entire village stood silent. Men, women, children, witnesses. This is sovereign land, the chief said. Your orders mean nothing here. Treaty of 1855 grants us pursuit rights for federal crimes, Howard replied, almost apologetic. I don't want bloodshed, just following orders. Your orders are based on fraud, the federal marshal called, riding up beside the chief. He held up the ledger, the letters. The charges against these people are void. Judge Crenshaw and Clyde Farrow have been arrested for conspiracy, fraud, and human trafficking. Howard hesitated. I haven't received any such notification. Because it just happened, the marshal said. 3 hours ago. You rode out before the telegraph reached Fort Benton. The captain looked uncertain. Behind him, his men shifted in their saddles. Then Eliza did something none of us expected. She walked forward, past the chief, past the warriors, straight toward the army line. Oswin in her arms. No weapons, no protection, just a woman and a baby standing between two forces ready to kill each other. Eliza, no! Pike started after her, but I grabbed his good arm. Wait, I said. Just wait. She stopped 10 feet from Captain Howard's horse, pulled out her slate, wrote something, held it high. I am not property. I am not a criminal. I am a mother. Will you kill me for that? Howard stared at the slate, at her, at the baby. Ma'am, I have orders. She wrote again. Orders from corrupt men. Will you follow corruption or conscience? The captain's horse sidestepped, nervous. Howard gripped the reins tighter. This isn't... Eliza turned, showed the slate to his men, walked down the line slowly, letting each soldier see. Some looked away. Others met her eyes, and something in them broke. She came back to Howard, wrote one more thing. Your mother would be ashamed. Howard's face crumpled. He was young, maybe 25. Probably had a mother who'd raised him to be honorable, to do right. And here he was, following orders to arrest a woman who'd done nothing but survive. He lowered his document. Stand down, he said quietly. Sir, one of his sergeants asked. Stand down, Howard's voice cracked. He looked at the federal marshal. I need to see that evidence, all of it, before I do anything. The marshal nodded, handed over the papers. Howard read, his expression darkening with each page. Finally, he looked up. This goes to the governor's office? Higher, the marshal said. We think it reaches Washington. Howard sat silent for a long moment. Then he turned to his men. About face. We're returning to Fort Benton. These people are under federal protection until proper investigation concludes. Captain, the sergeant started. That's an order, Sergeant. Howard looked at me, at Eliza, at Pike. I'm sorry. For what my government did, for what I almost did. He saluted, not to us, but to Eliza, then wheeled his horse and rode away, his men following. And the Blackfeet warriors lowered their weapons. The village erupted in cheers, but I couldn't celebrate. Not yet. Too much had happened. Too many were still lost. Eliza came back, and Pike swept her into his arms. Gentle, careful of his wound and her exhaustion, she laid her head against his shoulder, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked at peace. Old Joseph approached, carrying something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it. A ring, simple silver, engraved with Blackfeet symbols. This was my wife's, he said to Eliza. She died 20 winters ago, but she would want you to have it. He placed it in her palm. It means fierce heart. You have earned it. Eliza stared at the ring, tears falling. She slipped it on her finger. It fit perfect. Then she did something I'll never forget. She took Pike's hand, then mine, then Beatrice's, then Tommy's, drew us all together in a circle, the baby between us. She couldn't speak the words, but we all understood. This is family. This is what we fought for. Chief Joseph joined the circle. The old ways teach that family is not blood. Family is choice. You have chosen each other. Therefore, you are tribe. The sun broke through the clouds, first real sun in a week. It hit the snow and turned everything to diamonds. What happens now? Beatrice asked quietly. Pike looked at the baby, then at Eliza. We find the others, every name in that ledger. We bring them home. Could take years, Tommy said. Then we take years, I replied. The federal marshal approached. I'll help. Soon as we clean up this corruption, I'll assign men to search. We'll find them. And Clyde? I asked. Crenshaw? Federal trial. They'll hang. The marshal's voice was certain. This time, justice will be served. We stood there in the sun, this family built from auction blocks and burning cabins and winter storms. Not perfect, scarred, broken in places, but whole where it mattered. Eliza pulled out her slate one last time, wrote something, showed it to all of us. We were bought with money. We became family with love. Love wins. Tommy laughed, sudden and bright. Damn right it does. Pike kissed Oswin's forehead. Your mother's a wise woman, son. Beatrice squeezed my hand. You did good, Silas. Your father would be proud. I looked at them all, at this impossible, beautiful family. We all did good. That night, the Blackfeet held a ceremony. They gave us names in their language. Eliza became she who stands in fire. Pike became he who protects. Tommy became young brave heart. Beatrice became keeper of truth. And me? They called me man who sees. Why that? I asked old Joseph. Because you saw a person where others saw property, he said. You saw family where others saw strangers. You saw justice where others saw law. He smiled. That is the greatest gift. To see truly. 3 months later, we'd found 12 of the people from Clyde's ledger. 12 families reunited. It wasn't 200, but it was a start. Eliza and Pike got married, not in a church, but on tribal land, with both people's blessings. Oswin took his first steps the day before, walking between his parents like he owned the world. I stood watching, feeling every year of my life, but somehow lighter than I'd been in decades. Beatrice came beside me. You thinking about her? Your wife? Yeah, and our boy. Wondering if they'd approve. They'd more than approve, Silas. They'd be grateful you didn't let grief make you cruel. Maybe she was right. Maybe Marjorie and our son were watching somewhere, smiling at this crooked, beautiful family I'd found in the snow. The sun set over the mountains, painting the sky gold and red. Eliza saw me standing alone, came over, baby on her hip. She wrote, "Thank you for giving me a bed, for letting me sleep, for seeing me." And I took the chalk. Thank you for teaching me I still had something worth giving. She hugged me then, fierce, grateful, family, and standing there in the sunset with my daughter, not by blood but by choice, and my grandson, not by birth but by love, I finally understood. Some men measure their lives by what they build, others by what they own. But the truest measure is who stands beside you when the world catches fire. And I was rich beyond counting. Now, I'm sitting on this porch, same porch I built after the fire took the first one, watching snow fall just like it did that December in '81. 40-some years gone, but I remember it clear as yesterday. Eliza's inside making supper. She's 62 now, hair gone silver, but her hands still move quick when she's signing to the grandchildren. Pike passed 3 years back, good man to the end. But Oswin's got 5 kids of his own now, teaching them their grandfather's stories. Beatrice lived to 91. Spent her last 30 years helping us find those stolen people. We found 147 of them. Not all 200, but enough. Enough to matter. I know what some of you are thinking. That's a nice story, Silas. But life ain't that clean. Justice don't always show up. Happy endings are for fairy tales. You're right. Most times they ain't. But here's what I learned in that winter of 1881. You don't protect dignity because you're guaranteed victory. You protect it because that's what separates men from monsters. Law can fail. People can fail. Hell, I've failed more times than I can count. But the moment you see someone suffering and choose to act, even knowing it might cost you everything, that's when you stop being a bystander. That's when you become the story someone else tells their grandchildren. Dignity ain't bought or sold. Family ain't just blood. And justice, real justice, it don't always carry a gun or a gavel. Sometimes it just carries a willing heart. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been treated like you don't matter, if you've ever stood in the cold wondering if anyone sees you, I'm here to tell you, someone sees, someone always sees, and all it takes is one person with enough courage to say, "Not on my watch." Maybe that person's you. Maybe you're the one someone's waiting for. So here's my question for you, friend. When winter comes to your door, and it will, what will you do? Will you bar it shut? Or will you open it wide and say, "Come in, rest, you're safe now"? That choice is yours. Choose wisely. If this story touched you, I'd be honored to know where you're listening from. And if you've got a story of your own, about someone who gave you shelter when the world gave you none, or about a time you were the shelter someone else needed, well, I'd like to hear that too. Because these stories, they matter. Your story matters. Until we meet again, may your dignity carry you through the storms, and may you always have the courage to give someone a bed and let them sleep. This is Silas Drummond signing off from Montana Territory, where the snow still falls, but the fire never goes out.